I worked at a foie gras farm for 4 months and witnessed the whole process, from gathering the eggs to slaughter. The days were long and labor-intensive, and the cruelty I witnessed was horrendous. Before I started, I had heard of the cruelties of foie gras production, but I also heard that these claims were exaggerated or false. After the first few days of working, it was crystal clear that the production of foie gras is inherently cruel. The best way to maximize profits is to get the biggest and hence the most diseased liver. As my supervisor stated, the point of gavage is to make a duck as sick as possible, to bring them to the brink of death. Every Thursday, I would work at the hatchery. I would help remove the day-old ducks from the incubator cabinets. Once all the ducks were removed, the hatchery worker would sex the ducks, throwing the male ducks into a basket in front of me and throwing the female ducks into another basket, or sometimes directly into a garbage bag. My job was to de-toe the males. This was done using regular household scissors, and I was instructed to not only cut the nail, since it would simply regrow, but to cut the entire region where the nail protruded from. The female ducks would be thrown into the garbage, and when the garbage bag was 1/2 to 3/4 full, the bag would be closed, and depending on who was working, they would either be gassed with carbon dioxide, or the bag would simply be tied shut without any gas whatsoever. The reason that females are thrown out is because their livers are wrapped in veins, affecting the quality of their liver. The sex ratio of born ducks is about 55% male and 45% female, which means we were throwing away approximately 1,000 female ducks per week. Later, we would rip open the garbage bags and shake out all the baby ducks into the bins designed for animal carcasses. On every occasion, there would be live ducklings thrown into the garbage. Sometimes I observed only 1 or 2 live ducks, but sometimes almost every duck seemed to be alive. Opening the garbage bin, it would not be uncommon to see the whole top layer of day-old ducks peeping and moving about. Sometimes the baby ducks would be alive the next day. Every time we went to get the ducks, at least 1 or 2 ducks would be deemed too small and would be killed. One of the workers had told me we didn't take the small ducks because their livers would not grow large enough anyway. One worker seemed to do it more often, and it seemed to me he would search out small ducks just so that he could kill them. He would hold them by the legs and wings upside down and swing them like a cricket bat against a wall. One day we brought back 5 ducks that were too small, and one of the workers killed them by bashing their heads against concrete posts, while the rest of us unloaded the other ducks. On another occasion, the supervisor told us not to load 2 ducks that were singled out in the back of the shed in transport cages, and he told us to kill them. The worker asked if I wanted to kill them, but I said no, and he said, "We'll kill 1 each." He took the first duck, put it on the floor, stepped on his back, and grabbed the duck by the head and neck and twisted it several rotations. The duck convulsed and was flapping his wings, so the worker then kicked the duck, who ended up being kicked into the waste pit, where he continued to convulse. He told me to kill the next duck, but I said I was not comfortable. So he grabbed the duck and again stepped on the duck's back and twisted the neck several rotations. This time he backed up and said with a laugh that he had ripped off the duck's head. I went over to look, and saw that the head had been ripped off and was hanging, attached to the body only by a single thread of tissue. I kept saying how it was gross, and the worker just laughed and would tell me, "Don't worry, it's dead." Sometimes we would bring back more ducks than we needed, and if it was only 1 or 2 extra, we would kill 1 or 2 of the smaller ducks. Often this was done by bringing the duck outside to the back of the shed, and a worker would either bash the duck's head against the wall, or sometimes, with an overhead swing, bash the duck against the ground. The ducks never died immediately. I would have to pick up the ducks and while still convulsing, throw them into the garbage bin on top of the other dead ducks. The garbage bins were always overflowing with the bodies of dead ducks. When we brought the month-old quarantined ducks from the quarantine to a raising shed, they would be handled very roughly. At the raising shed, we would get on the cages, open the doors, and grab the ducks to throw them down a ramp. Because they were thrown around, many ducks broke their legs and wings. At 12 weeks old, the ducks were ready to begin the cycle of force feeding, or gavage. To gather the ducks, we would back the truck to the doors of the barn and create an enclosure with plywood and spare cages. Once ready, 3 or 4 of us would get behind the ducks and herd them toward the enclosure. When the ducks stopped moving or were moving slowly, workers would scream and lose their tempers. I saw on numerous occasions workers who would kick with all their force a duck so hard that the duck would be launched through the air 15 or 20 feet. Ducks at the rear of the flock would be picked up by the necks, heads, or wings and thrown toward the enclosure, sometimes 20 or 30 feet away. The workers in the enclosure would pick up 2 ducks at a time by one wing and lift them to the workers on the truck. While grabbing the ducks by the wings, you could feel and hear crushing noises, and sometimes you could even feel the wing pop out of the socket. We would put 7 ducks per cage, which was a very tight fit, and the cage door usually had to be slammed shut, usually on the duck. The feeding sheds housed around 1,000 ducks. A duck would be put into a top closing wire cage with only their neck and head protruding. This made it easier to grab the ducks by their head to extend their necks in order to shove in the metal feeding rod. The machine was on wheels and would get pulled down the line of ducks. We would grab their heads in one hand, squeezing to open their beaks, and a metal rod that was attached to the machine would be shoved about 12 inches down their throats. I was told the reason we force-fed the ducks was to induce a liver disease, where the liver gets huge and fatty. We were rewarded for increasing the size of their livers as big as possible. The notion that the ducks enjoyed or looked forward to their force feeding is utterly ridiculous. As soon as the ducks received their dose, they would frantically shake their head from side to side, trying to spit out the food and often vomiting. The ducks would have trouble breathing pretty soon after feeding began. I was told that this was because we were increasing the size of their insides, which would push up against the lungs. Near the end of the force feeding cycle, breathing became very laborious for the ducks. During the last few days, most ducks could not even lift their heads, and every day for the last few days, many ducks would die. It was not uncommon during the last few days to have 6 or 7 dead ducks after a single feeding. At the slaughterhouse, we would unload the cages of ducks, and we would be there for about 15 minutes. During this time, I would go over to the slaughtering area to see how it was done. The ducks would be grabbed from their cage and hung by their legs upside down on a sort of conveyor belt system. About 20 feet down the line, the ducks were supposed to go through an electrical bath, which was supposed to render them unconscious. I stood directly in front of this bath and saw that the overwhelming majority of birds would lift their necks, missing the bath completely. The slaughterer would grab the upside-down duck by the head and puncture the jugular, causing him to bleed to death. The conscious ducks, and again, most of the ducks entirely missed the bath, which was only a few feet across, would flap their wings violently, squirm, and thrash about.
Hello, I'm Mary Tyler Moore for Farm Sanctuary. No animal should be subjected to cruelty, including farm animals. But sadly, millions of these sensitive creatures are mistreated and abused on farms across America. Animals raised for food commonly endure inhumane living conditions, and legal protection in the United States is grossly inadequate. Farm animals are specifically excluded from the Federal Animal Welfare Act, and they are excluded from most state anti-cruelty laws.
Given the legal system we have right now, the farm animals involved in the factory farming system essentially have no legal rights whatsoever, and their existence is really not even recognized by the law. And as a result, the farmers and the corporations that are involved in that system are basically free to treat the animals in any way they see fit.
Across America, traditional farms are being replaced by large-scale, industrialized farms where economic efficiency takes priority over animal well-being. And animals are treated like mere production units. Factory farming practices common in the United States are so cruel that they have been outlawed in other countries. Systems which should be banned in the U.S., as they have been in other countries, include gestation crates for breeding pigs, battery cages for egg-laying hens, and veal crates. In a natural environment, sows form tight-knit social groups. They are intelligent and loyal animals who raise their young cooperatively. Young pigs live with their mothers in a close family group for about a year before forming their own social groups. Physical contact is important to pigs, and they often lie close together. Pigs are playful, active, and inquisitive. In an outdoor setting, they forage over several miles, rooting and exploring their environment with their powerful but highly sensitive noses. But in factory farms, pigs are not allowed to engage in basic natural behaviors. A hog industry spokesman stated, quote, "Forget the pig as an animal. Treat him just like a machine in a factory. Schedule treatments like you would lubrication. Breeding season like the first step in an assembly line, and marketing like the delivery of finished goods." Factory farmers confined breeding sows for most of their lives in barren metal crates, which are just 2 feet wide. They're called gestation crates because the sows are kept there during their pregnancy or gestation period. The crates prevent the sows from exercising in order to save on feed costs, and to allow every aspect of the animals' lives to be controlled in order to maximize breeding production efficiency. At the end of their pregnancies, the sows are moved to farrowing crates to give birth. When the piglets are 2 or 3 weeks old, they are taken from their mothers and fattened for slaughter. The sows are immediately re-impregnated and returned to gestation crates to begin another 4-month gestation period. They live a constant cycle of impregnation, birth, and re-impregnation, with each sow producing more than 20 piglets each year. Breeding pigs imprisoned in crates suffer both physical and psychological disorders. They cannot walk, exercise, or even turn around, and their muscles atrophy. Standing on the hard, slatted floors causes foot and joint disorders, while scraping against the bars of their cages results in open sores. These intelligent animals are prevented from engaging in social behavior or from satisfying their basic needs, and this leads to frustration, chronic stress, and depression. The pigs routinely exhibit neurotic coping behaviors such as repetitive bar biting and chewing the air, which indicate that the animals are in severe discomfort. After several years of this process, the breeding sow's productivity drops off and they are sent to slaughter. Their battered, worn-out bodies are typically ground up and used for low-grade meat products like pepperoni and sausage. In some instances, the sows become so sick and crippled they cannot even walk, and many die before reaching the slaughterhouse every year. Gestation crates are inherently cruel, and they should be banned in the United States as they are in other countries. In nature, chickens live in a complex social structure. They have distinct personalities and communicate through various means. The birds remain close together when roosting, and they spread out while foraging and exploring their environment, scratching and probing the ground with their sensitive beaks. Hens construct nests and perform a series of behaviors just before laying their eggs. Once their chicks are hatched, they act nobly and selflessly to care for their young. Chickens form positive relationships with other animals, including people. But chickens used for commercial egg production are not allowed to scratch in the dirt or to see the sun. More than 95% of the commercial eggs produced in the United States come from hens who are confined in battery cages, barren wire enclosures, which are lined up in a row, stacked in tiers, in huge factory warehouses. 5 hens are typically packed in a cage measuring just 20 inches wide, and each bird is given just a half square foot of space. Battery-caged hens are packed so tightly they cannot walk or even stretch their wings. The stressed, frustrated birds are driven to excessive pecking and fighting. To reduce the resulting damage, egg producers cut off parts of the birds' beaks. This painful procedure involves cutting through bone, nerves, and soft tissue, and it can be fatal. Constantly rubbing against the walls of their harsh wire cages, the hens' feathers are worn off, and their bodies are covered with bruises and abrasions. There is no consideration given to individual birds, and millions of hens die in battery cages every year. When 2 live hens were discarded in this trash can, the egg factory's lawyer argued that its birds could legally be treated like manure. The judge asked, "Isn't there a big difference between manure and live animals?" And the company's lawyer responded, "No, Your Honor." Shockingly, the egg factory was found not guilty of animal cruelty. The inhumane living conditions of battery cages are compounded by the intense demands of modern egg production. And after 1 or 2 years in production, the hens are worn out. So-called spent hens are pulled from the cages, and their brittle, calcium-depleted bones often break in the process. Their battered bodies are typically used for animal feed or processed meat products, like pot pies or soup, where they can be ground up or shredded and the blemishes go unnoticed. Battery cages are inherently cruel, and they should be outlawed in the United States as they have been in other countries. Cattle are gregarious herd animals and communicate through a series of oral and other signals. They enjoy each other's company and become distressed when separated from herd mates. Cows are loyal and affectionate animals who develop lasting relationships and who can remember both good and bad events for years. Mother cows and their offspring form tight bonds, and in a natural environment, calves will nurse for more than a year. But sadly, young calves who are raised for veal never have a chance to play or even go outside. To produce veal, young calves are taken away from their mothers at birth and chained by the neck in crates measuring just 2 feet wide. This is where they spend their entire lives, unable to walk, turn around, or even lie down comfortably. This severe confinement makes the calves' meat tender, since the animal's muscles cannot develop. Veal calves experience chronic stress and exhibit neurotic coping behaviors. Calves raised for veal are fed an all-liquid diet, which is purposely deficient in iron and fiber. It is intended to produce borderline anemia and the pale-colored flesh sold as veal. At just 5 months of age, these weak animals are slaughtered. They would not survive into adulthood because their diets prevent normal development of their digestive system. In many instances, veal calves don't even make it to slaughter, and dead calves are a common sight at veal farms. This calf collapsed while being herded into the slaughterhouse truck and was left to suffer where he fell in the alleyway of a veal barn. The production of veal is inherently cruel, and it should be banned in the United States as it has been in other countries. The institutionalized abuse of animals on factory farms has spread across the United States, largely out of public view. But as Americans learn about the blatant disregard for animal welfare, they are shocked and appalled.
I had no idea that this is how they did this.
Responding to consumer concerns, businesses, legislators, and policy leaders are starting to speak out against farm animal abuse. For the first time since the Humane Slaughter Act was enacted in the 1950s, legislators in Washington, D.C. are discussing the need to protect farm animals from blatant abuse. Senator Robert Byrd spoke passionately on the floor of the U.S. Senate, criticizing battery cages, veal crates, and gestation crates. He stated, "Our inhumane treatment of livestock is becoming widespread and more barbaric. These creatures feel, they know pain. They suffer pain just as we humans suffer pain. Barbaric treatment of helpless, defenseless creatures must not be tolerated. Life must be respected and dealt with humanely in a civilized society." Like all animals, farm animals feel pain, and they deserve to be protected from cruelty. As a civilized nation, we have an ethical obligation to recognize farm animals as sentient beings and to prevent their suffering. On behalf of Farm Sanctuary and all the animals with whom we share the planet, thank you for caring.
Come on in. There she is, beautiful girl. She was tagged for slaughter, and that would have been her fate, but she wanted to live, and so she literally ran for her life, and now she'll live out her life at Sanctuary. It's interesting how the public responds when one individual animal, makes a run for her life. They end up making headlines on national news. People's hearts go out to this one individual animal. The cruelty that happens to farm animals is largely hidden, behind factory farm walls, and people aren't aware of it. When you look in her eyes, everyone wants the best for her once they get to know her. And when people are able to identify with an individual and look her in the eye and see that she's a living, feeling being who has a will to live, then people care.
I've been working here with Animal Care and Control for almost 9 years. This morning was really astonishing to me. All of a sudden, it's dawned on me, this sweet, innocent cow running away from being slaughtered. And I never even thought about it before, that something is actually being slaughtered and it's my ground beef and it's my dog on steak and stuff like that, and we've been eating this for years. I never pictured that face on that, and it hurt. I can't do that. I can't. So now we're going to work on not eating me and my entire family. Because I'm realizing that this is a life that was saved today. And with my family, we'll be saving a couple more. Thank you.
She looks like she's about a year old. Absolutely beautiful Hereford. And those, unfortunately, are cows that they use for meat. She's most likely at a live market. And because they have a very strong will to live, like any living creature, she got loose. She had a will to live, and she did it. Hello. And where she's going now, she's going to have like cows of her own breed even. She's going to be so happy.
When the trailer arrives,
Yeah.
the cows in the herd will moo.
Yeah, they
will
move in a big line. Everybody lines up.
They will start mooing to her to comfort her and to tell her that they're there, and she will moo back.
Any animal, any creature has a strong will to live.
She's an ambassador for all animals who are still suffering in slaughterhouses and on farms and who don't have such a lucky outcome. People love a happy ending, and it's happy.
In the town we were around, it was called Oakville, Iowa. It seemed to be a very large pork-producing town, and the pigs literally had nowhere to go. Everything was gone. All the cornfields around there were just gone. Were covered with water or were just mud fields. So the only high ground that the pigs had to go were the levees and the woods.
The levee itself, it spanned about 15 miles. Going up and down the levee, we saw hundreds of dead pigs that had died from gunshots or died from mainly the elements. We would be out there from 8 or 9 and trying to catch pigs until sundown, which was 9 or 10, and whatever pigs we caught we would take back to the holding area that we had for them, and you wake back up again at 6:30, and it was very long days.
When each of the pigs arrived, we had them in groups as they did the rescue. So when I first came in to take care of the pigs, they were all skin and bones. Like, everybody was very skinny, and their skin was bad. So my main thing was to get them back into shape. Hi, bow-legged mama. You're so beautiful. Ha 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 ha. Tippy, such a big piggy. Ha 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 ha. She's very playful. She's a very young mother. I'm guessing this is her first litter, and she actually likes to play with the piglets, and they'll run and play, and she is like so obsessed with being outside and being in the mud. So she's a great mother. She's teaching them all these great habits. But yeah, she's covered with mud. And again, like, she's a gestation cell, so she would have spent her entire life, like her entire 3 years, that they would have kept her in a crate and never gone outside, and they're on concrete, and so like a lot of these guys came in with abscesses on their shoulder bones and on their legs. Without the floods, they wouldn't be here, which is kind of creepy and scary, that like that kind of a tragedy. It's actually made their life better. But we're happy that their life is better, so, and they're happy their life is better. But again, gestation sows never even see their babies because they're not allowed to touch them. They say that they'll kill them if they're with them, that they'll smash them. And if, as you can see, she hasn't killed any of her babies. She's had them in like the worst conditions possible. She had them on the levees, she had them out in that sun, and she took great care of them. It's definitely putting a burden on our shelter budget. Besides the pigs being really emaciated when they came in, most of them had very severe sunburns. We have some pregnant sows. We're also dealing with hernias. A lot of the pigs, the male pigs, have hernias. The other thing we're dealing with is really severe pneumonias. They had a lot of water intake. Some of them required going to Cornell and being on oxygen. Most of them have required like really heavy-duty antibiotic treatments, like repeat treatments. The other things we're dealing with are foot infections, which is very common in pigs, especially the gestation sows, and those are the ones we're seeing it in. That's from being on concrete too long. They get it as they age anyway. Pigs are bred to be very large, but these sows had really serious foot infections that are going to require surgeries to remove claws because the infection's up in the foot, in the bone. Basically, everyone's starting to get better. The medical costs are still going to be happening because Cornell can only take in so many at a time. So it's going to be like a constant trip to Cornell.
They were there because people put them there in those factory farms. They had no control of where they were, so we were going to do anything we possibly could to help them survive. Helping those pigs, putting them on the trailer, getting them back up to somewhat of a healthy state in order to transport them back here. That was a lot of hard work, but I think we have a lot more hard work ahead of us here at the farm now. Just with all the health care, the day in and day out health care that we have to do just with those pigs, let alone the farm itself, it's going to be a long haul for us and for the pigs.